This Christmas, one of my favorite songs. This Christmas is going to be a very special Christmas, but this Christmas might be somewhat challenging for some of you because we're in a lockdown and you might be spending time with people who are difficult to spend time with. So if that's you, then this video is dedicated to you. Coach Drew. Hey everybody, Coach Drew here. It has been a long time since I've made a video, so I hope you enjoy this. I was talking to somebody earlier today. Hope you can hear me over the kids in the background. It is that season. COVID, lockdown, we're all in this thing together. There's a lot of good to it, but sometimes when we're in this thing together, there's some dynamics and some dysfunction, if you will. I was talking to somebody today and they are wanting to make the most of this opportunity to change some of those patterns. It reminded me of an interview that I did with Cheryl Weber a few years ago. It's got some really good information, so take a look, take a listen.
Although many of us wish we had the kind of Christmas Norman Rockwell depicted in his famous paintings of peace and beauty, unfortunately that's not what most of us experience when gathering with extended family. It might be closer to comedian George Burns' famous quote that says happiness is having a large, loving, caring, close-knit family in another city. Well, family coach Andrew Blackwood is here with me today to help us sort through the sometimes tumultuous family relationships that we may have to deal with this holiday season. So does that ring true? Do you have a lot of people coming to you saying, please help me get through the holidays sane?
You know what? Yeah, whether it's Christmas or Easter, all year round, whenever family comes together, sometimes there are some challenges that we want to be prepared for.
So what are people saying to you? Because when I think about this, I think about kind of that crazy uncle or maybe that perfectionist parent that's following you around telling you how you can do everything better, right? You know, like, or I don't even know. There's just so many different scenarios of relatives that you have to deal with.
Precisely. That's why we talk about wanting to understand your type of dysfunction or in your family. Well, for starters, typically when we try to define dysfunction, we think about rules that, you know, were in place for a purpose and time, and you've outgrown them. But people haven't let go of those rules or even those roles.
Yes.
So having a good understanding of what that's about will help you decide what you want to address and when you want to address it and how you want to address it.
And it's getting more complicated than ever now, isn't it? Because now it's not just your crazy family, but sometimes it's like your parents are divorced and do you invite your dad and his new wife and how's that going to go over with your mom? And then you got step siblings, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like we're actually just dealing with so many different layers of dynamics that are all under the surface. So is it healthy for us to pretend that nothing's going on? Is that the healthier way to deal with it?
Ooh, that's a tricky question. I never like pretending. I think it's really about the timing and being intentional about what you want to address when. So some things it's perfectly acceptable and really actually important to address in the moment, on the spot. When other times it would be better to say, you know what, I want us to come back to this. Let's address this at another time and place.
Right, so that not everyone has to suffer from that one little...
Right, you don't want to make things big and dramatic, and that's one of the reasons why people don't like addressing things, is because they're afraid they're going to make it worse. However, if you've had a history of not addressing it and not addressing it, that's probably going to make it worse over time too. Which is why we were talking about, like to think about roles. If you've adopted a particular role or you inherited that role or it was placed on you and you got stuck in that role, it's important to figure out how you want to move beyond that role. And who knows, Christmas might be the perfect time to do that. So whether it's the person who is labeled as the forgetful one or the responsible one, it's important to figure out, okay, what about that is true? Where can I take responsibility if it's something that I want to change? And then how do I go about doing that?
And sometimes you can regress as well, because maybe you've moved past the forgetful one, the late one, or whatever it is, and you get back around your parents. And I find this sometimes when I start acting in ways that I'm like, I'm not even like that anymore, right? But it's just this familiar thing. What is that? Why does that come over us?
Well, you know, I like to see it like family environments they're like a thermostat. You grow up in a certain climate, and that's what you know to be comfortable, even if it's not healthy or what you would experience as normal beyond your family. When you come back home, it's like somebody resets that dial. So over time, it's important to kind of change it and change it again and change it again until everybody gets used to the new normal temperature.
So it might be baby steps is what you're saying. You can't just come as the new person, new improved version of yourself overnight, or...
I mean, you can, however, is it fair to expect that everybody's going to know that, embrace that, and be okay with that? Because even though you might have changed, other people might not, and their perspective about you might not be as well informed. So it's an opportunity to kind of introduce yourself at that time.
And so, and one of the things you advise, and I love this, is kind of troubleshooting conversations, like difficult conversations that might come up. So I know that every Christmas, my father tells me that, you know, you could get a better job or improve your life, or why are you with that guy, or whatever it is, you know that's going to happen. It happens every year, happens every time you see him. So how do you troubleshoot that in a way that you can keep it from getting worse?
You know, like one of the things is in advance, anticipate it, prepare for it, call your dad. Beat him to the jump, right? Say, you know what, these are things that I've been working on. And, you know, sometimes you tend to raise this in front of everybody. Let's talk about this, you know, just between you and I. And giving them the benefit of the doubt is important. Most of the times, good intentions are had by family members, but good intentions don't always equal good outcomes. So when we start to say, you know what, I know you want to help me. And that's probably why you raised this. However, this is what I would find to be most helpful. A lot of times we tell people what not to do, but we don't actually give them specific instructions about what to do. So inviting your dad to say, you know what, let's go for a cup of coffee, just the two of us, and let's talk about that. If that's something that you want to do, that might be more an efficient way of your use of your energy and time.
So I've come up with a conversation that I know that always happens, and I've come up with a new way of dealing with it. I'm not going to go into my old patterns. I'm not going to freak out. We're not going to have a fight.
Right.
I'm going to do this. And even though I do this, the person doesn't seem to get with the program, and they will not relent. Then what do? What's the next thing? Like, you know, there's a big blow up at the family dinner, for example.
Ooh,
or maybe he's the one that's blowing up. Maybe you're behaving perfectly.
Right?
I'm just saying, it could happen.
No, and it probably does, because every family is different, right?
Yeah.
So there's no one-size-fits-all approach, whether we're talking about, you know, anger management or even just preparing a meal for the family. There's always going to be things that are different. So if you anticipate this, sometimes you can time these occurrences down to the minute, right? So if you can anticipate it, and you might want to, you know, take a rain check or take a bathroom check, or even, you know, decide, you know what, I'm going to leave. I have another appointment at a certain time of the day. Because sometimes you might be able to avoid those situations if you've already approached the person and they're not at the place where they're taking responsibility, and they're not at the place where they kind of recognize their own errors, or where places that they can grow. Then you might want to be strategic about how you interact and when you interact.
Now, and is there an element of grace here? Because I know sometimes, like, you've changed. You've grown out of some of the dysfunction that you grew up in, but maybe the people that you've come from haven't changed. And you still want to see them at Christmas, but you can't change the situation. Is there an element of sometimes of just grinning and bearing it and just saying, you know what, that's just mom, you know, or that's just Aunt Carol, whatever. Is there just an element sometimes that you just suffer your way through Christmas?
Suffer your way through Christmas. You know, there's two things that I think. You know, God gives us grace. And especially if not everyone in your family is of the same perspective, and not everyone knows Christ, you might be positioned there to offer that grace and be that source of patience. For me, the thin line between that and abuse is it's a careful distinction that we need to come to. I think being so passive, where we allow people to erode and contradict everything that God is saying to us about ourselves, I don't think that's fair to anybody in the process. That's not going to help them grow. It's not going to help you grow. However, if you can kind of find that line, again, coming back to say, where can I take responsibility? Because if someone's critical, something that might help shift their point of criticism is where you can take responsibility. So if you can say, you know what, this is what I'm working on, and I appreciate your help with that.
Wow, that takes humility.
It really does. It really does. And that's one of the ways that we can bring grace in and model growth and say, okay, this is where I am, and I appreciate you for who you are and your intentions.
So what I'm hearing is, it's not always about the other crazy dysfunctional people in your family. Sometimes it's about you and your dysfunction, that you have to kind of own it, see it, and work on it, and maybe even acknowledge it.
Yeah, and I think it goes a long way because nobody's perfect. We're always going to be in a process of growth. So the sooner we acknowledge that and we can model taking responsibility and making those changes, it invites people to either see us differently and or join us.
If that resonated with you, I trust that you will make use of some of those strategies. And by all means, be sure to let me know. And I look forward to connecting with you soon. Until then, continue to learn, heal, and grow.